and when love found its voice. The rain hammered against the cafe window like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry, but Emma barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to the woman sitting across from her, the woman whose laughter had once filled every corner of her life, the woman she had walked away from 3 years ago because fear had been louder than love. Maya's hands trembled around her coffee cup, and Emma could see the question burning in those familiar brown eyes. The same question that had haunted her own sleepless nights. What if they had been brave enough to choose each other when it mattered most? The story of how they arrived at this rain-soaked reunion began on an ordinary Tuesday morning in a university lecture hall, where Emma had been a teaching assistant, struggling to make literature feel alive to disinterested students. Maya had walked in late, her hair still damp from the shower, carrying the scent of jasmine and possibility. Their eyes met across the rows of laptops and half-awake faces, and something shifted in the universe. Something small but irreversible. Like the first crack in ice that promises spring, Emma had felt it immediately. That dangerous recognition, the sense that this stranger somehow held pieces of her she hadn't known were missing. But Emma had spent her entire life building walls around her truth, learning to smile when people asked about boyfriends, nodding along when her mother planned her future, wedding to some faceless man who would never exist. She had become an expert at hiding, at folding herself smaller and smaller until she could fit into the shape everyone expected. Maya, however, was different. Maya moved through the world like she had nothing to apologize for, like her existence itself was an act of revolution. She wore her identity openly, proudly, in the rainbow pin on her backpack, in the way she spoke about her ex-girlfriend without lowering her voice, in the confidence that radiated from her like heat from summer pavement. Emma found herself drawn to that light even as it terrified her, attending office hours she didn't need, lingering after class to discuss books they both knew Emma had already mastered. They began meeting for coffee, then dinner, then long walks through the city, where night turned streetlights into tiny moons and conversation flowed like water finding its path. Emma told herself they were just friends, that the electricity she felt when their shoulders brushed was normal, that everyone's heart raced when certain people smiled at them. If you believe in the power of love that refuses to hide, if you believe in second chances and the courage it takes to live authentically, please like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to channel name so you never miss stories that remind us what it means to be human and to love fearlessly. The night everything changed arrived disguised as an ordinary Friday. They had gone to see a film at the independent cinema Maya loved, one of those small, beautiful movies about women who dared to love each other in a world that told them not to. Emma sat in the darkness watching light flicker across Maya's face. And when the characters on screen finally kissed, when the theater filled with that particular silence that comes from collective held breath, Emma felt something break open inside her chest. Maya reached over without looking and took her hand, and Emma didn't pull away. They walked out of that theater into cool autumn air, and Emma's hand was still wrapped in Maya's warmth, and the city lights blurred through tears she couldn't quite explain. They stopped on a bridge overlooking the river, where water moved beneath them dark and endless, and Maya turned to face her with an expression so tender it hurt to witness. Emma knew what was coming, knew that this was the moment everything would change, and she was both desperate for it and terrified beyond measure. Maya had whispered her name like a question and a prayer, and then she was closing the distance between them, and Emma was not pulling away, was instead leaning in, meeting her halfway. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them trembling with the weight of what they were crossing into together. Then it deepened, became more certain, more real, and Emma felt years of denial and fear begin to crack and crumble around her. She tasted salt and realized one of them was crying, or maybe both of them were. And it didn't matter because this was the truest thing she had ever done. When they finally pulled apart, breathless and wide-eyed, Maya had smiled and said simply, "I've wanted to do that since the moment I met you." And Emma had laughed through her tears and replied, "I've wanted you to do that since before I even knew wanting was possible." The months that followed were the happiest of Emma's life. She and Maya became inseparable, building a small, beautiful world between them filled with inside jokes and shared silences in the kind of intimacy that comes from truly being seen. They studied together in Maya's tiny apartment, legs tangled on the couch, textbooks forgotten as they got lost in conversation. They cooked elaborate meals that never quite turned out right and collapsed into laughter over burnt pasta and smoke detectors. They spent weekends exploring the city, finding hidden bookstores and vintage shops, taking photos of each other in front of murals and street art, documenting their joy like they could preserve it forever. Emma felt herself unfurling like something kept too long in darkness finally brought into light. She cut her hair short the way she'd always secretly wanted. She wore the clothes that made her feel like herself. She stopped performing, the version of Emma everyone expected, and started becoming the person she actually was. But joy has a way of making the outside world feel more threatening. And Emma's family existed very firmly in that outside world. Her mother called weekly with updates about cousins getting married and family, friends having babies. Each conversation a pointed reminder of expectations Emma was failing to meet. Her father sent articles about successful young women in traditional careers, subtle pressure disguised as interest. Her younger brother, the only family member she had ever felt close to, started pulling away, his texts becoming shorter, his visits less frequent. Emma could feel the truth pressing against the walls of her closet, demanding release, but the thought of saying the words out loud to her family made her physically ill. Maya was patient at first, understanding that everyone came out on their own timeline. That family was complicated, but as months turned into a year, as Emma continued to hide their relationship from everyone who mattered to her, tension began to crack the foundation they had built. The breaking point came at Emma's brother's wedding. Maya wasn't invited, wasn't even acknowledged to exist, and Emma had spent the entire reception pretending to be someone she wasn't, smiling through interrogations about her love life, deflecting suggestions about nice young men her aunts wanted to introduce her to. She had danced with a groomsman she barely knew while her mother beamed with approval. And later that night, when she finally escaped back to her apartment, she found Maya packing her things into boxes. The look on Maya's face was not anger, but something worse. Something like resignation. Maya had said, "I love you, Emma, but I can't be your secret anymore. I can't keep myself small so you can stay comfortable. You have to decide if loving me is worth being uncomfortable, worth disappointing people who might not deserve your protection." Emma had stood there frozen, wanting to argue, wanting to make promises, but the words wouldn't come because she knew Maya was right. And so she had let her go, had watched the only person who had ever really known her walk out the door. And she had told herself it was for the best, that some loves weren't meant to survive the real world. The 3 years that followed were a study in going through motions. Emma finished her degree, got a respectable job at a publishing house, moved into a nice apartment that felt empty, no matter how much furniture she bought. She dated a few men her mother approved of, relationships that never progressed past polite dinners and awkward goodnight kisses. That felt like betrayals of her own truth. She followed Maya on social media from fake accounts, watching her thrive and grow and fall in love with someone new, someone brave enough to love her in daylight. Emma told herself she had made the right choice, that some people were meant to live quietly, safely, that not everyone could be as courageous as Maya. But late at night, alone in her empty apartment, she would remember the weight of Maya's hand in hers, the taste of that first kiss, the feeling of being wholly, completely herself, and she would understand that she had traded her one chance at real happiness for the comfort of other people's approval. The catalyst for change came from an unexpected source. Emma's younger brother showed up at her apartment unannounced one evening, drunk and crying, and through his tears he confessed that he was gay, that he had been gay his whole life, that the wedding had been a sham built on fear and pressure and the desperate hope that marriage would fix something that wasn't broken. He had looked at Emma with eyes full of pain and asked, "How do you do it? How do you live your whole life pretending to be someone you're not?" And Emma had felt something shatter inside her chest. She realized in that moment that by hiding, by choosing silence, she had sent her brother a message that being who they were was something shameful, something to hide. She had taught him, through her own cowardice, that love was less important than appearances, that truth was less valuable than comfort. That night, after her brother had fallen asleep on her couch, Emma had done something she should have done years ago. She had written an email to her parents, simple and direct, explaining who she was and who she loved and that she was done, apologizing for either. She had sent it before she could second-guess herself. And then she had sat on her kitchen floor and cried until she had no tears left. The response from her family was mixed. Her father didn't speak to her for months. Her mother sent long, confused messages about how she had failed as a parent, where she had gone wrong, whether this was a phase or a choice or a sickness. But her brother had hugged her tight and whispered thank you. And slowly, painfully, some bridges began to rebuild while others burned completely. Emma learned that living authentically meant accepting that not everyone would come with her into her truth, that some relationships were built on conditions she could no longer meet. It was the hardest, most painful work she had ever done, but it was also the most necessary. For the first time in her life, Emma felt like she could breathe fully, like she was taking up the space she deserved instead of apologizing for her existence, which was how she ended up searching for Maya's name in the university directory, how she ended up sending a tentative email asking if they could meet, just to talk, no expectations, which was how she ended up sitting in this cafe with rain battering the windows, watching the woman she had never stopped loving decide whether to give her another chance. Maya had listened quietly as Emma explained everything, how she had grown, how she had changed, how she finally understood that love without courage was just another form of cowardice. She talked about coming out to her family, about the relationships she had lost and the ones she was slowly rebuilding. She talked about her brother, about realizing that her silence had consequences beyond just her own life. She talked about 3 years of regret, of wishing she could go back to that bridge and make a different choice, of understanding finally that Maya had never asked her to be perfect, only to be brave. When Emma finally fell silent, Maya had been quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on her coffee cup. Then she had said, "I'm seeing someone." And Emma had felt her heart crack cleanly in two. But Maya had continued, "Though it's not serious, not like we were, not even close. I've spent 3 years trying to find what we had with other people, and it doesn't exist because what we had was specific to us, to you and me in that particular moment." Emma had felt hope flutter weakly in her chest, dangerous and desperate. Maya had reached across the table then, covering Emma's hand with her own, and the touch had sent electricity up Emma's arm, proof that some things don't fade with time or distance. "I need you to understand that I can't go back to hiding," Maya had said, her voice firm but not unkind. "If we do this again, if we try again, it has to be different. I need someone who will hold my hand in public, who will bring me home for holidays, who will love me loudly enough that there's no confusion about what I am to them." Emma had squeezed her hand tighter and said, "I want that too. I want all of that. I want to be brave enough to love you the way you deserve." Maya had studied her face for a long moment, searching for truth, for certainty, for proof that this time would be different. And then, slowly, she had smiled. That same smile that had first caught Emma's attention in a university lecture hall years ago. The rain outside seemed to soften, or maybe Emma just stopped noticing it. They talked for hours as the cafe emptied around them, staff members cleaning tables and giving them pointed looks. They talked about what the years apart had taught them, about the people they had become in the space between then and now. They talked about fear and courage in the thousand small choices that add up to a life. When the cafe finally closed and they were forced out into the night, the rain had stopped. The streets gleamed like they had been polished, reflecting lights from shop windows and street lamps. Maya had turned to Emma on the sidewalk, water dripping from awnings around them, and asked, "So what happens now?" Emma had taken a deep breath, feeling her whole future balanced on the edge of her answer. She thought about the years she had wasted hiding, about the happiness she had sacrificed for other people's comfort. She thought about her brother sleeping on her couch, about the email she had sent her parents, about all the small acts of courage that had led her to this moment. Then she had stepped forward, closing the space between them, and kissed Maya right there on the busy sidewalk where anyone could see. It was different from their first kiss, more certain, more real. This time there was no hesitation, no fear, just the simple truth of two people finding their way back to each other. When they pulled apart, Emma had kept her hand in Maya's, holding on like she would never let go again. People walked past them on the sidewalk, some staring, some smiling, some not noticing at all, and Emma found that she didn't care. For the first time in her life, she was choosing love over fear, choosing truth over comfort, choosing the hard, beautiful work of being wholly herself in a world that didn't always make space for people like her. If this story touched your heart, If you believe in love that refuses to stay hidden and second chances that come when we're finally ready for them, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and leave a comment below telling us about a time you chose courage over comfort. Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who need them most. They didn't have all the answers that night. Maya was still seeing someone else, however casually. Emma still had work to do repairing relationships and building new ones. They both had healing left to do individually and together, but they exchanged numbers, made plans to meet again, agreed to take things slowly and see what happened when they both showed up as their full, authentic selves. As Emma walked home that night, her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Just 3 words, I missed you." Emma had stopped under a streetlight, rain still dripping from tree branches above her, and typed back, "I missed me too, but I'm finally finding my way back." Please take a moment to comment below and share what this story means to you, especially if you've ever had to choose between love and fear. The months that followed were not easy, but they were real. Maya ended her other relationship, and she and Emma started dating again, slowly rebuilding trust and intimacy. Emma brought Maya to meet her brother, who hugged her tight and whispered, "Take care of my sister. She's been lost without you." She attended her first Pride parade with Maya's hand in hers, surrounded by thousands of people celebrating love in all its forms. She posted photos of them together on social media, not as an act of defiance, but as a simple acknowledgement of truth. Her mother eventually came around, slowly, awkwardly, learning new language and unlearning old prejudices. Her father took longer, but one day he sent a card addressed to both of them, a small gesture that felt like forgiveness. Emma learned that coming out was not a single moment but a series of choices, made daily, sometimes hourly, to live authentically even when it was uncomfortable. She learned that love was not about grand gestures but about showing up consistently, about choosing someone over and over again when it would be easier to run. She learned that courage was not the absence of fear but the decision to move forward despite it. And she learned, finally, that she deserved to be loved exactly as she was, not as a secret or a compromise or a version of herself edited for public consumption. Years later, Emma would stand in front of family and friends, wearing a white dress and holding Maya's hands, promising to love her through whatever came next. She would think about that rainy night in the cafe, about the years of fear and hiding that had preceded it, about the long journey back to herself and to the person she loved. She would remember that first kiss on the bridge, and the second kiss on the sidewalk, and all the kisses in between that had taught her what it meant to be brave. And she would understand finally that the story was never about finding love. It was about finding the courage to love openly, honestly, completely, and in doing so finding herself. The rain that had seemed so threatening that night had been washing away. Everything false, everything pretend, leaving only what was real and true and worth fighting for. And what remained, standing in the clear light of morning, was love in its purest form. Love that didn't hide or apologize or make itself smaller. Love that took up space. Love that demanded to be seen. Love that changed everything.